Welcome back to the Budget Gamer channel, where we bring you critical and in-depth reviews of just about every indie game we can get our hands on, and today we're going to be taking a look at Layers of Fear Legacy for the Nintendo Switch. And not to spoil the review for you first thing out of the chute, but this game is a legitimate masterpiece, which, actually kind of thinking about it, is a bit of a pun, because the whole game is about an artist trying to finish his masterpiece. But that being said, no matter how good a game it isn't really ever without some flaws. So, let's go ahead and dive straight into the story. More or less in Layers of Fear, as I've already mentioned, you're playing through the eyes of an artist who's trying to finish his masterpiece. I know, horrific, right? But as it turns out, this artist is insane. And I mean that in the best possible sense. No, he's flippin' crazy. And not only is he insane, he's, as you find out exploring the manor, really demented. And it will be your job as the player to literally walk through his eyes as you explore the manor to try and figure out what's exactly going on and to find inspiration to finish said masterpiece. And if you were to combine the horrific intellects behind persons like Jeffrey Dahmer, Edgar Allan Poe, possibly Van Gogh, and H.P. Lovecraft, you might get kind of close to the sick, twisted mind you'll be pursuing. But how it actually works out in gameplay is more of a horror sim than a horror game. And I say this because the genre of Layers of Fear is not anything close to what we'd consider from a modern horror as we've seen over the last couple decades. It doesn't focus on gore, there's absolutely no combat, it's more about pure and unfettered suspense. And all you really have to do as the player is, in kind of the vein of a haunted house, just explore the manor. And while there are a few really light puzzles to solve and a few objects to collect, you're really just walking. But as easy as this may sound, at least as face value, it's not exactly that straightforward. And within probably your first half hour of gameplay, you'll realize that the rabbit hole you're about to stumble into is both deep and twisted. And it becomes very difficult to tell if you're suffering as the player from the delusions of the artist you're playing as, or if the house itself is driving the artist crazy. And while that revelation may come to you in one of a handful of different ways, it's because the developers of Layers of Fear actually established multiple endings. And I know what you're thinking, how can this be? How can a walking sim have multiple gameplay styles and multiple endings? I mean, normally a walking sim is literally you just walking. It's very linear, very scripted, very direct, because it's got one story for you to find the end of. But as you're playing through Layers of Fear, you'll discover that there are a few things that reach out and grab you the most. Whether it's trying to discover the history of the situation, trying to explore the house, or trying to figure out what's going on with the artists themselves, certain things will lead you down certain pathways. And those pathways, while distinctly divided, are incredibly interlaced and interconnected through the entirety of the gameplay. And so as you explore twisting, revolving, ever-shifting and changing rooms and hallways through this apparently gigantic manor, you'll be weaving back and forth and crossing over paths to chase down the multiple different potential endings and pathways in the game, only to really figure out exactly what might be going on really close to the end. And it's actually the way that these branching pathways are laid out that even grants Layers of Fear a good bit of replayability. Which again is really different than what we've considered to be horror in the modern gaming era. I mean, once you've seen a jump scare, you've seen a jump scare. Visually though, in Layers of Fear, the imagery is probably one of the absolute most poignant features of the game. And as a first-person walking sim, you'd hope that would be the case. But while the graphics in the game are obviously really good, how they're used is what makes the game so impactful. Layers of Fear uses its visual imagery to kind of lead and mislead you to what it wants you to think and what it wants you to actually do. Hallways will twist and end in doorless rooms, and then you turn and find a window or a door only to find that it's been blocked off. Only to turn again and find some creepy image or maybe another passage waiting for you from the way you just came. And the imagery in the game, though repetitious, always comes along in a slightly different way, making it again impossible to tell if this really is a gigantic sprawling manor or if the protagonist is just experiencing it through his grand delusion. And in that sense, even through visual repetition, somehow the developers managed to make this game a truly incredible experience that somehow rides that fine line between psychological and supernatural. The audio in the game is incredibly well done. The entire thing is spooky and creepy and full of creaking floors and the expected thumps and bumps that precede a jump scare. But as amazing a game as it is, and definitely as much as I enjoyed it, it doesn't mean that there aren't a few flaws to be had. And first and foremost is probably going to be with its object manipulation. Pretty much the only thing you'll have to do as the player, as I've already mentioned, is wander through the manor and find your inspiration. So, the only thing you'll really have to do is open doors and drawers and search. But whether you're playing with the gyroscopic controls of your Joy-Cons or you're using the actual analog thumbsticks, the manipulation of items, it just feels a little bit clunky. It's definitely not game-breaking, and you do get a handle on it fairly quickly, but that first hour is a bit of trial and error, just trying to figure out how to do stuff. And that's partially because the character's first-person forced perspective is also locked into his respiration, meaning that the camera does have a slight up and down movement with the character's breath. But again, that's a very small annoyance for such a poignant experience. Moving on, though, is one of the horror game critiques that confronts pretty much all horror games in general. And that is, unfortunately, the nature of jump scares. Like I said earlier, if you've seen a jump scare, you've seen a jump scare. And so while this certainly affects the game's replayability, knowing what kind of scenes you might get into, it also affects late gameplay. After the first couple hours of this 3 to 4 hour long campaign in a horror simulation, even though the twisting hallways and setups are really trippy and mind-blowing, after a while you kind of get the sense of the developer's flavor. And in that sense, what was incredibly, almost grotesquely shocking becomes sort of more leaning toward the edge of predictable. But I can't really call that a flaw of Layers of Fear because that's a flaw for, like, every single horror game and movie out there. And overall, taking a step back and looking at Layers of Fear Legacy as a complete and total experience, I'd have to say, just like my opening comments, this game overall is a complete masterpiece. It's so far out of left field from typical expectations that there's no way it can't make an impact. And with diverging pathways through the entire manor, there are lots of things to explore, and there's no way to do them all in one play. Which means, almost unlike any other horror game out there, it does have guaranteed replay value. And if you're looking to get it on sale like I did, and it should actually still be on sale right now as of the time of the review's airing, then it is totally worth it because its normal price tag's like $20 and I think I got it for $5. So especially if you are an existing horror fan, Layers of Fear is a must-have. And even though it does have some creepy dolls and a few little poltergeists in the game, if you're not normally a fan of horror because you don't like the blood and gore and the first-person FPS style gaming, then maybe Layers of Fear is one that you might want to take a chance on. Because it is all about the mystery and the suspense. Though I'm not going to say that certain images might not be a little bit disturbing. But anyway, that does about wrap up the review of Layers of Fear Legacy on the Nintendo Switch. So if you enjoyed the review, or especially if you found it helpful, feel free to throw us a comment or a like to show your support, and don't forget to click that little bell icon when you subscribe to stay updated with the latest content. There are new and unique indie games coming out literally every single day, and there are thousands out there already. So whether it's an easy hard pass or an absolutely unforgettable gem, chances are, if it's on the Switch especially, you're probably going to find out about it right here. But anyway, this has been The Budget Gamers. As always, thanks for watching.